We're living through unprecedented times. There's a war raging just 6 hours away from India between Israel and Hamas. Israel, an important country for India, especially when it comes to technology and defense, and of course for India's regional ambitions. The success of the recently announced India-Middle East-Europe economic corridor depends heavily on peace in the region. Closer home, markets so far have been measured in their response, but beyond that, beyond the markets, beyond the investors, the world at large is watching this worst attack on Israel in 50 years and the deaths of over 1,000 Israelis and Palestinians. The focus now should be on preventing the escalation of this conflict. To understand what's at stake for India, what should be India's strategy, and how vulnerable does this war make India where oil prices are concerned, and the implications of this war on India, I'm joined by Mr. K.C. Singh, former diplomat, and I have with us Mr. Prabal Sen, Senior Research Analyst, ICICI Securities. Mr. Singh and Mr. Sen, many thanks for joining us. Mr. Singh, let me begin by asking you, India has always had a very strong relationship with Israel. What in your view should India do to ensure that this war that we are seeing does not spill to other parts of the region?
Look, we have little say in that because there is obviously what Hamas has done to Israel. Israel is reacting. There's nothing that India can say other than what Prime Minister has said, that, solidarity with you because of the act of terrorism. Most of the problems which may arise are from the spillover, as you said. If this is not contained, there is talk of Qataris trying to play a role, or Egypt can play a role to see if the hostages can be given back. I don't think that's going to happen, because Hamas, what Israel has said, that they want to eliminate Hamas permanently as a threat to Israel, and that cannot happen till they decapitate it fully. They've gone, but now the problem is that there's a whole mesh of underground tunnels, because over these last 17 years, from 2006, Hamas has learned to live with aerial attacks and the Israeli attacks coming at them. So they've built an underground mesh of tunnels below the civilian areas. And it's claimed that, in fact, they probably even have the hostages they've taken to those areas. Now, if that is the situation, it's going to be very difficult, even if the Israeli troops go in. It'll be hand-to-hand combat, and that's what Hamas wants. Generally, a weaker opponent, but well-armed, which doesn't have tanks, which doesn't have aeroplanes, would like to do a street-to-street or tunnel-to-tunnel fighting, because there it gets evened out. So I don't know what strategy really Israel has, but they are cornered in this. And because they are citizens also of other countries which have been taken hostage, of Thailand, probably Americans, because there was an international festival taking place. So they didn't pick and choose, they just picked up whoever they could pick up. So it has become an international problem. Now, how it is resolved, I don't think there'll be a resolution before it gets somewhat worse. And there is at least some bloodletting on the part of the Hamas to satisfy the public opinion in Israel. When that point is reached is very difficult to see. But we don't want the spillover, because so far the good development is that even the Americans have said, we don't see any Iranian hand. There is no proof of it at the moment. Now, if you draw them in, or Hezbollah is drawn in, that is when there is a problem of this spreading to the Gulf.
Right. Mr. Singh, I just want to bring in a statement that I read in the Wall Street, where the Pentagon has warned Iran and Hezbollah to think twice, quote unquote, before joining the conflict. So clearly there's a very stern stance there. But we do know that that Hamas has also come out and said that Iran did help them commission this atrocity. So I'll come back to you. I'd like to welcome Professor Bhanumurthy from B.R. Ambedkar Institute of Economics and Mayank Jha, economist of HDFC Bank, to further understand the economic implications of this. Let me come across to you, Prabal, first. What's at stake for India? We are closely watching the oil price situation, which is anyways has been above our comfort level for quite some time now. How worried are you about this?
I think it is obviously a worrying situation. The data, even before this conflict came in, was suggesting that crude prices will continue to rise upwards. There's a very clear supply deficit in the markets of anywhere between 1.6 to 3 million barrels a day, depending on who you ask, whether it's IEA or OPEC estimates that you would want to trust. Supply cuts continue to be in place from Saudi and Russia. Russian crude supply, anyways, remains uncertain because there's a conflict raging there as well between Russia and Ukraine. And our fuel consumption has been growing at a fairly steady pace. The implications for us as a country which imports more than 75% of our crude and around 50% of our gas is always going to be profound if energy prices globally are in uncertain territory and continue to go up, which is what is the case right now. So this conflict is definitely, just adds to the perfect storm, frankly, that India is facing from an energy price standpoint.
Right. Right. Let me come across to you, Mayank. Mayank, how difficult is the situation when it comes to India's macroeconomic fundamentals, because this is an election year, and considering India imports much of its oil needs, and we've heard the oil minister say that between 90 to 92, 93 is something that India is comfortable with, and we heard him yesterday saying that that India is watching the situation very closely. Until now, we've done pretty okay with our macroeconomic math, but with this war raging just 6 hours away from New Delhi, plus you have state elections starting 7th of November, how, what are the macroeconomic factors at play here that could really, spoil India's macroeconomic fundamentals?
In a nutshell, I think very little, in the sense that right now, the war is contained. And if we look at a little bit of history right now, Dr. Singh is here, 2014, 2006. So there has been some history of conflict between these two countries. And till the time it remains localized. So I don't think there is significant risk to India's macroeconomics, in the sense that excuse me. So all the major oil fields and everything is a little further away from the conflict zone, so that is not directly there. And even if we look at our dependence on imports from Iranian oil, so that has reduced substantially. Our import from Iran, which was virtually oil, has reduced from some 14-15 billion a year to about 600 million a year last year. So in essence, that we have roughly decoupled from Iran. The only risk is when it becomes it expands to a zonal conflict where other parties get involved, and which I think has been globally, that has been the concern, with the US saying that Hezbollah and Iran keep away. And I'm no expert, but still, with Hamas also saying that we have got support from Iran, but US saying there is no official support from Iran. So in a way that they like back channels are working to keep it contained. Right. Excuse me, my throat is a little bad. So those are the things. So in the medium term, we think for the oil, 85 to 95 range is what we are saying in the near future. And that should hold. I mean, that should be comfortable, which the petroleum minister also mentioned. So I'll stop here.
Okay. Sure. Professor Bhanumurthy, there are two wars raging right now that the world is grappling with. You have the Russia-Ukraine war, and now you have Israel and Hamas. What is the impact that you see on the global economy of this, from a sentiment perspective, from a general considering we are looking at a world where the world has been increasingly looking inwards. Globally speaking, what's the impact that you see of this new war that has just started 4 days ago?
No, clearly, I think global economy cannot tolerate two wars. I think that we need to be very clear. And for the past 1 year, how the Russia-Ukraine war is actually destabilizing the overall global economy. I think we have been witnessing that, and we are hoping that there could be some end to that. But I think added to this, the Israel-Gaza war, I think, is going to add much more uncertainty to the global economic recovery. And as the other speakers pointed out, I think if it spreads to the overall West, I think if more players come into this conflict, I think then we will see, it's going to have a huge impact on the global economy, not just on the GDP, but also on the prices and also on the trade. And we have already known that the current year as well as the next year, the trade is going to be extremely subdued. And added to that, the conflict will prolong that slow growth in the trade. But if it comes to Indian economy, I think we also cannot really be immune to these two wars in the two major regions. And maybe right now we are not depending on many other countries when it comes to oil. But I think the cascading impact of this localized conflict right now will start reflecting on the global oil prices, and I think that will have its repercussions on domestic inflation as well as domestic current account deficit. So to that extent, we are not completely immune, but I think we have much better macro fundamentals. Maybe we should be able to observe a little better than many other countries.
Okay, let me go across to Dr. Singh. Dr. Singh, currently there is obviously a huge need for India to follow a very agile and a very balanced approach. And we've all discussed here the need and importance that Iran should not get involved, even though Hamas has said that Iran has contributed or helped them. I don't want to put in words, and I don't have the exact words here, but they have hinted that Iran has helped them in some way to organize these attacks on Israel. What, according to you, should be India's balanced and agile approach in this, so that the conflict stays contained to the areas it is in right now and does not spill over to Iran? The Prime Minister has expressed solidarity. Is there anything else that you think India should be doing?
You're asking me?
Yes, Dr. Singh, yes.
No, I'm not a doctor. I'm Ambassador Singh, former ambassador. I wish I was, but I'm not a doctor. Okay. No, I think what's happening is little that we can do to contain it. What the Americans have done is they moved the Fifth Fleet up, which is unprecedented. They've come to the Eastern Mediterranean, and that is really to serve a signal to the Hezbollah, that if Hezbollah comes in, then they're going to be bombarded. And they should not, and the Israelis have warned Syrians that they will not leave Damascus out of it. So if there is any movement by Hezbollah, because they know today there's an overland link between Iran via northern Iraq and Syria into Lebanon. And so there would be a Syrian hand in it. So Syria has been warned, and the American presence is there, heavy American presence. So that is meant to contain it. But as far as oil prices are concerned, there's another factor. The two countries that can ramp up their production and therefore get a grip on the rise are Saudi Arabia and Russia. And Russia is in no mood to help, because Russia, Iran, and this group, indirectly Hamas, have their strategic interests converging. To the extent you have trouble in Israel, and therefore the Americans are distracted. They have less time and less energy for the Ukraine conflict. As it is within Europe, there is a fatigue setting in. The other element that we haven't mentioned doesn't have to do with the wars. It's El-nino. This year, the El-nino, the warming of the oceans, has set in, and it'll peak around Christmas. And therefore, that is going to have an impact on winter rains and probably the production of crops. And that may be the third factor which may be destabilizing. So you may be getting a perfect storm of 2 or 3 different negative factors, which can start impacting then global food prices, global energy prices, and that is what then drives inflation. So at the moment, there's little that we can do, because we don't have links to Hamas. In any case, once you align openly with Israel, you have no window open to Hamas. Hamas, if it's going to listen to anyone, it's going to be a combination of Qatar and Egypt, because the only channel of communication now available to the world, there are 2 outlets available from Gaza Strip. In the north to Israel, which is blocked, in the south to Egypt, which may be still open for humanitarian aid. So the Egyptians can play a role, and they realize it's having a destabilizing impact on them. And Egyptian policemen yesterday shot two Israeli tourists. So they don't want it. And there is a general, it cannot be ruled out that this disaffection will spread to the Arab street. And we've seen Arab Spring before, so you don't know if it is sustained over a period of time. And I think that is the gamble of Hamas, that then the street gets active in the Arab countries. And once that happens, the regimes come under stress.
Right. So, I want to ask all the panelists here about the impact that this will have on our economic corridor that we very proudly spoke about and showcased to the world, India, Middle East, Europe economic corridor. It totally depends on linkages, on-ground linkages between different ports, between the Middle East and Israel. So, Mayank, Mr. Sen, Professor Bhanumurthy, what's the impact? Like, does this mean that this project is going to go into deep freeze now for quite some time?
Should I go ahead?
Yes, please.
Yeah. So I think, whenever a project of this scale is, considered, so this conflict is, it's the Middle East tension is something that would have been looked after when we were looking at it. So I'm sure it'll get delayed. Obviously, there will be some impact on this. But additionally, I think there is one more angle, which was the Saudi-Israel deal, which was being, backed by US indirectly. So that has definitely taken a backseat for now. And there was also, there was some hope that once this deal gets through, then US can, come into, nudge the Saudi regime to, cut back, draw down on their supply cuts. And because don't forget that Saudi has some spare capacity of, I think, 3 million barrels per day, which is roughly the amount which Iran is exporting. So right now, I think that will take definitely a backseat, that that Saudi-Israel deal, which was looking at normalization and long term. And I think even this economic corridor would have counted that factor in as a positive. So I think it'll get delayed, definitely.
All right. Professor Bhanumurthy, your thoughts, and Mr. Sen, your thoughts?
Yeah, I completely agree with Mayank's view. I think right now this project need to take back seat. But more than that, I'm a little more worried about what's happening in Marrakesh, where G20 Finance Minister Summit is happening. We were hoping, as a follow-up of Delhi Summit, we were hoping that MDB reforms will take a big, leg up. But I think Israel conflict will really shadow that discussions. And I think this corridor will I think have to wait for some time. I think.
Yeah. Can I go ahead?
Yes, Mr. Sen, please do.
Yeah, I think I just want to add a little bit of, also add the fact that one of the panelists spoke about the Saudi-Israel deal that was being, negotiated behind the scenes. I think one important consequence that could have happened if that deal had progressed was a de-hyphenization of Saudis and Russia, which would have been, I think, an important win, not just for the US, but also for the energy markets. So unfortunately, what this incident does, and of course, there are, more qualified panelists than me in terms of commenting on the economic corridor. So I wouldn't want to add anything to that. Yes, it gets held up. But I think the Saudi-Israel deal getting now pretty much done and dusted right now, given the context, I think that keeps Russia and Saudis as the natural allies, as they have proven in the global energy or global oil markets. I think the de-hyphenization, if that could have been achieved, would have been a very, very important positive from a supply perspective, which unfortunately gets held up. So that's a more important consequence of this conflict at this point of time.
Right. There's a report that said that as the war continues, it's going to add to India's shipping costs, shipping of freight, exports. It's going to add to insurance premiums for traders in India exporting to Israel. Mr. Singh, I'd like to come to you on this. Going forward, so every day, of course, is very crucial with this war, and all of us would like this war to end early. But what is the threshold after which it gets extremely difficult, after which it gets extremely problematic for India and the rest of the world? Because we were hoping that the Russia-Ukraine war would have ended in 2 months, 3 months, but it still is continuing. What if a similar situation plays out here as well?
Look, it's not two major nations fighting each other. It's a terrorist organization, well entrenched, running Gaza, and it is a nation state which has gone to war many times. And ironically, it's 50 years after Yom Kippur, this is 1973 war, and that is when really the cartelization of oil started for the first time. And we are seeing that cartelization's impacts even today. So that cartelization is 50 years old. Now, going forward, the Israeli objectives have been stated. They want to completely defang and completely eliminate Hamas as a threat to them in the future, which means they have to really take it to a finish. But what's going to happen is, at the moment, the public opinion, global public opinion, is with Israel. But if a lot of civilians keep getting killed, and that's bound to happen, there are also hostages which may be killed, and Hamas is threatening to start beheading them if the Israelis attack the civilian centers. I think it'll just get very messy, and I don't see how long really this kind of a thing can continue, but certainly a few weeks. It's not going to stop until global pressure then starts building on Israel to say, you've done enough. I don't think you are going to be able to reach either the top leadership is not in Gaza. They've gone to Syria. They've already escaped. Nobody knows where the top leadership is. And just killing their fighters is only going to make a point up to a stage. They can always rearm. They have as it is. And the rearming is done by Iran. It's done indirectly by Russia. It's really a strategic competition taking place between two major blocs. And there is a US, after all this, what we're talking about, the connectivity deal, was only a manifestation of US reconfiguring the security architecture in West Asia. That's why they were pulling Saudi Arabia away. Now that's all finished. Not only in the time, I don't see in the foreseeable future how you can restore it. But also do remember that the Suez Canal is not very far from the Gaza Strip. It's just south of it. It may be about 50 kilometers or whatever. And that's Egyptian territory. Normally, Hamas will not attack it because their only savior now at the moment and line of communication is Egypt. They wouldn't like to offend Egypt. But certainly the element of danger is there. If you've got missiles flying all over the place and you've got flotilla, naval ships, Fifth Fleet, it certainly the insurance premiums and all will go up.
Mayank, Mr. Sen, anything that the markets are betting on at the moment? Markets tend to know a little bit more about, because you're dealing with money. Markets tend to place their bets with some information, some calculation that they do. What are you betting on when it comes to this war? How long do you see this going on for? And what is the breaking point after which the situation will become extremely problematic even for India?
You want to go first, sir, or should I go? Up to you.
Yeah, go ahead.
All right. So I think that's an incredible question. If I knew half of what you're asking, I think I would be doing something else. I think to answer the second part of your question, what level does start to worry us? I think already, if you look at it, as I was mentioning earlier, the crude prices are at fairly high levels. But as I think some of the other esteemed panelists mentioned, if some of the other countries start to get involved, if Lebanon comes into the picture, if Egypt comes into the picture, then I think crude prices can probably shoot up even to $9,500. That's when it really starts to get problematic. The government, to to its credit, has managed to stave off some of the inflationary aspects since April of last year. By basically holding up retail fuel prices. So to that extent, we have in fact been spared the impact of rising petrol and diesel prices internationally. But if prices were to go to $95, then the extent of losses for the OMCs will get to a level where some adjustments will need to be made. And I don't think the government is fiscally in a position to meet that. So you would have to pass on some of that to the customers. So that is real inflationary impact on the one hand. Secondly, of course, the more crude prices go up, 80% of it is import. So your import bills start to go up, and your fuel consumption, product demand in the country has been actually growing at a healthy pace of 4 to 5%. So those two impacts then obviously have a trickle down impact across the board. If your diesel prices start to go up, you've got inflationary aspects coming through on food items, on transportation, logistics, and so on and so forth. So right now we are doing okay, and while the minister has said $90, we should be able to manage. But once it starts escalating, it's very difficult to estimate what price level it would actually stop at. So that's the sort of downside risk at the moment for the Indian oil and gas and economy.
I think,
Right. Mayank?
Yeah, just to add, see, the major bet is that it will likely remain localized and contained, and there will be no additional parties that will come. As Ambassador Singh mentioned, that there are forces at play trying to contain other parties. But if that comes into picture, that is where the risk will be. And I think up till now, the government and the OMCs have absorbed the prices. Less than a fortnight ago, we were trading above 90. Oil was trading above $90 per barrel. So I think up till 85 to 95 is fine. But once it goes above, so that'll become a problem. And remember, like you started, that this is an election season. This is the start of election season. So even, no matter what, I think most of that, balancing and absorption will have to do, like the government will have to do. But yeah, the real bet is that, it will remain localized, and, there'll be no significant addition to it.
Right. Professor Bhanumurthy, what are the options for the government considering? In the budget, they had in fact budgeted for a much lower oil price than what we are seeing at the moment. So, according to you, what are the options that are available? We have state elections. There has been pressure, and we've spoken to the government also whether there'll be an excise cut to make it easier for people to afford petrol and diesel. So, can the government go down the populist path? And according to you, what is the breaking point for India after which it might have to take some tough decisions?
Yeah, I think Honorable Minister very clearly mentioned that anything above 90 is going to be a issue for Indian economy. And but my feeling is that if you look at the last 1 year data, I think we had slightly better comfortable position to absorb any increase in the international oil prices, because for almost a year OMCs OMCs have had the benefit of importing crude at almost 5 to 30% premium. So I think the government went to the extent of introducing windfall gain tax on the OMCs. So even now I think there is export tax on the petroleum. So given that kind of situation, I think they have more space on the taxes side. In fact, they can also try to bring down the customs duties on the petroleum. But at the same time, there could be some pressure on the fiscal condition, either in terms of limited pass-through on the retail prices, or asking the OMCs to absorb those shocks, so that will have its impact on the non-tax revenue also. So I think overall, my feeling is that to 90, India can actually absorb the shock, but little more than that also, I think the OMC the space to absorb those kind of shocks. But I think anything above 100,
do you see?
Anything above 100 would certainly be will have its repercussions on the polity.
Do you see inflationary pressures rising for the next quarter? Because indications are that in this quarter, for which data is expected tomorrow, CPI might actually be down to about 5.2%. But do you see inflation going up in the last quarter of this calendar year?
No, I don't think so until the government or the OMCs decide to, pass on the shocks. But as it is, as I said, the OMCs still have more space to really absorb those shocks because they can reduce their profit margins. I think that to that extent, we still have more space for absorbing. I don't think it will have any impact on the retail prices. But as Ambassador Singh pointed out, and we have been writing about it, it all depends on how that El-nino impact is going to play out. And right now, I think the
Sure.
food price also cooled down. So we should expect a 5 to 5.5% inflation in the whole quarter.
Okay. Final word to Mr. Singh. Mr. Singh, with this war, how do you see the power equations changing in this region? And do you see it having a spillover effect on how India deals with its key allies and how India deals with the world?
Well, the world has certainly changed, and the way the countries will deal. Firstly, Israel has lost their deterrence. Now, how do they get their deterrence back? They thought they got this open air jail in Gaza, 2 million people locked in 2 exit points. That the Palestinian issue is lost in the last 10 years. Ukraine war is there. Post 2001, that's 9/11. This issue just went off the table. So they had contained the Palestine Authority in the West Bank. They were expanding there. The problem which arose was that Netanyahu, when he formed his government in January, he took on board extremely right-wing coalition partners, and they pushed him to really go to other extremes on more settlements, on regularizing settlements, and I think that really added to it. So now the change has already taken place. Israel has to restore that. Now, once that happens, the impact of how much bloodletting is there in the Gaza will be there in almost every Arab country and Islamic country, particularly Arab countries. So what is the impact? What impact does that have in Egypt, in Libya, in other countries, Morocco, and then also coming to the Gulf? Their behavior gets affected. How they deal with US gets affected. Saudis have already stepped back. Today, Saudi Crown Prince spoke to King Abdullah of Jordan. He spoke also to President Abbas of Palestinian Authority. Nobody has spoken to President Abbas in months. So new equations are being worked out, not only because of power equations, but because of pressure of public opinion in their countries. They can't be seen as abandoning the Palestinians at this stage. So in a sense, it takes the clock back, which means you'll have to start talking of a fair solution to the Palestinian problem, which was forgotten, the two-nation principle. So now going back to that means everyone has to redo their sums and then start reconfiguring the world. So that's hoping it remains restricted to that region. If it spills out, then all bets are off.
Right. We do hope that this escalation does not happen and this war remains contained and, of course, gets over very quickly as perhaps it started. Thank you so much for joining us, all of you, for your very nuanced perspective. It'll be, of course, we'll be closely watching the situation and we'll be coming back with all the updates on the war and how it's going to impact India and what are India's bets on this and what are India's options on its dealings with Israel and the rest of the world right here on Money Control. Thanks so much for watching.